Joining me now here in the studio, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. Sarah, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Great to be with you.
So, what is the latest on the negotiations? Did they make any progress yesterday?
Well, they made some progress yesterday. The fact that they're sitting down at the table is some progress in and of itself. But they've got a long way to go. I mean, Democrats set down the first thing that one of the individuals from the Democrat side said in the meeting was, "We're not here to make an agreement." So this was the beginning of a conversation that still has, I think, a lot left to be worked out. They're going to meet again later this afternoon, and hopefully they'll continue to make progress and continue to move the ball down the field. At the end of the day, though, Democrats have said over and over again that they support border security, that they support protecting American citizens. Now it's time to fulfill some of those statements that they've made, work with the president. Let's get this done. Let's open the government.
Well, of course, the question is the wall the best way to do it? I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. But again, going back to Friday, the president meant what he said, that he is prepared to fight for the wall, to continue the shutdown for months or even years.
Well, I think that's one of the things that people misunderstand. The president's not fighting for the wall. He's fighting for the protection of American citizens.
But he wants the wall to do that.
Absolutely. He wants the wall, and he wants a number of other things. We have a completely broken immigration system. We have a national crisis, not just of safety and security, but a humanitarian crisis. We have drugs. We have human traffickers. We have terrorists that come across our border, and there has to be a stop to that. And we want to do not just the wall. Certainly that's one of the most important factors. We know that it works. We know that in the places that it's been, it's 95% effective. We want to be effective across the board, and that includes the wall and other technology.
But you're not answering my question. He meant what he said. He's prepared to continue this fight, this shutdown, for months or even years.
Absolutely. The president means what he says when he says that. But it would be outrageous for Democrats who agree with the president. That's what's the most outrageous thing to me, and something that frankly is so just incomprehensible. They agree with the president. They agree that we need border security. They just are unwilling to let this president win. And I think at some point they have to decide that they care more about Americans than fighting the president. And so far we haven't seen a willingness on their side to fully do that.
Well, let's talk about caring about Americans, because House Democrats this week passed 6 bills that would fund 8 agencies unrelated to Homeland Security, unrelated to the wall, that would get them back going right now. And the question is, why not sign that bill, fund those agencies that have nothing to do with the border wall, and not hold those hundreds of thousands of federal workers and the services they provide hostage?
Look, we're not holding anybody hostage. The president wants to fund the government. He wants to open the government.
But you could open those 8 other agencies.
Chris, we've been having this debate for years. At some point, we have to say enough is enough. Until we can come together, we can be reasonable, which we have put forth in good faith multiple offers to Democrats to say, let's make a deal. Let's have a discussion. Let's get to a place where we agree. We have to stop kicking the can down the road and just continuing to say, let's do it again in 30 days. Let's do it in 45 days.
No. But I'm not talking about Homeland Security. You can continue to fight about that if you want and shut it down. But why hold agriculture hostage? Why hold justice hostage? Why hold the Treasury Department hostage? Why not fund them? They have nothing to do with the border wall.
Look, the president wants to do this all at once. He knows it's better if they can focus on getting all of these packages done at one time.
Isn't the real reason because you want the leverage from all the agencies?
It's not that. But you also have to look at the six bills. Those aren't the budget that we submitted either. There are a lot of discrepancies between what we submitted. Those have all been approved by Republicans in the Senate. I'm not saying we oppose those 6. I'm just saying to make it like this is an easy deal. We want to be able to negotiate, but at the same time, you can't just keep passing the buck. This is a major point of contention, and let's just sit down and work it out.
Okay, but if this shutdown drags on, not months or years, but even into February, it's going to start to hurt real people. Take a look at this, Sarah. Federal tax refunds will be delayed. Food stamps for 38 million Americans will be cut. Millions of people will lose rental assistance payments, and union leaders say hundreds of TSA workers are already off the job because they can't afford to get to work. President Trump thinks the border wall is worth all of that?
Look, the president certainly doesn't want any of those things to happen. But you know what else he doesn't want to see happen? He never wants to make a phone call like the one he made earlier this week, where he spoke to Officer Singh of California's widow because an illegal immigrant came across our border and killed him in cold blood. That shouldn't happen in this country, particularly when we have things that we know can help prevent it. Every life, that's what sets America apart from every other country. We value life. It's what makes us unique. And the day that we stop doing that, even if it's 1, 10, or 100,000, that's when we stop being the greatest country on the face of this earth. Not only people like that, but we also have a massive influx of drugs that come across the southern border. 90% of the heroin that comes into this country comes across through the southern border, and 300 Americans are killed from that every single month.
Let's talk
to look at it across the board.
Let's talk about the wall, because there is no question that there has been a big spike in the number of family units coming across the border. The president talks about terrorists potentially coming across the border. And here is Secretary of Homeland Security Nielsen. Take a look.
CBP has stopped over 3,000 what we call special interest aliens trying to come into the country on the southern border. Those are aliens who the intel community has identified are of concern.
But special interest aliens are just people who come from countries that have ever produced a terrorist. They're not terrorists themselves, and the State Department says that there is, quote, their words, no credible evidence of any terrorists coming across the border from Mexico.
We know that roughly nearly 4,000 known or suspected terrorists come into our country illegally. And we know that our most vulnerable point of entry is at our southern border.
I know this statistic. I didn't know if you were going to use it, but I studied up on this. Do you know where those 4,000 people come, or where they're captured? Airports.
Not always, but
airports.
Certainly a large number.
The State Department says there hasn't been any terrorists that they found coming across the southern border from Mexico. It's by air,
it's by land, and it's by sea. It's all of the above. But one thing that you're forgetting is that the most vulnerable point of entry that we have into this country is our southern border, and we have to protect it. And the more and more that individuals
they're not coming across the southern border, Sarah. They're coming, and they're being stopped at airports.
They're coming a number of ways. There's certainly, I'm not disagreeing with you that they're coming through airports. I'm saying that they come by air, by land, and by sea. And the more and more that our border becomes vulnerable, and the less and less that we spend time and money protecting it, the more that we're going to have an influx, not just of terrorists, but of human traffickers, drug inflow, and people that are coming here to do American citizens harm.
Okay. The president now says, and this was a revelation on Friday, that he can go around Congress and build this wall on his own. Take a look.
We can call a national emergency because of the security of our country. Absolutely. No, we can do it. I haven't done it. I may do it. I may do it. But we can call a national emergency and build it very quickly.
How serious is he about that? Has the White House drafted an emergency order, a resolution that he could announce tomorrow? We're declaring a national emergency. We're going to build the wall. Has he set a deadline for when he's going to end talks and simply say, I'm going to go off on my own and do it? And is he really prepared?
It's a lot of questions.
Well, three. Is he really prepared? It's all the same question, which is how serious is he? Is he really prepared to go off on his own and use money that was authorized for military construction and build a wall instead?
The president is prepared to do what it takes to protect our borders, to protect the people of this country. He knows that the #1 job he has as president and commander-in-chief is to protect its citizens. And if he doesn't take that seriously, whether it's at our southern border or whether it's from terrorists coming from whatever way they come or any other place that
really
people come to do harm to Americans, then he is not going to be the president that he knows himself to be.
And does he really, just quickly, does he really think that he has the authority to build the wall with funds that were appropriated for the military construction without congressional approval?
As we've said for the last several weeks, we're looking and exploring every option available that the president has.
And is that a viable option?
Whatever action he takes will certainly be lawful, and we're looking at every option we can. This is something the president takes incredibly seriously, is very passionate about, and is not going to stop until he figures out the best way to make sure we're doing everything we can to make America safer and more secure.
I got less than a minute left. President Trump is at Camp David today to meet with White House senior officials about his priorities for 2019. What can you tell us about the meeting and about what his agenda is.
We've had an incredible first 2 years under the President Trump. The economy is strong. ISIS has been on the run. The judiciary is being made. We have just a number of successes over these first 2 years. We want to look at how we're going to continue to build on those as we move into 2020.
Top priority?
I think the president's got a lot. Immigration certainly has to be at the forefront. Right now, that's one of the biggest things that we have to get done is securing our border, but not just securing the border, but fixing the immigration system as a whole. It's completely broken. The president wants to make sure we look at all of the different things, loopholes that we can close to make that better. Infrastructure, fighting the opioid crisis. Those are going to be things that also not only are the president's big priorities, but things we think we might be able to get Democrats to actually work with us. The American people elected them to come here and do more than just fight the president, and we hope that they'll fulfill their constituents' hopes for them and do exactly that.
Sarah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in today. Always good to talk with you.
Always great to be here.